Right, so today I want to talk about this article out of the Edmonton Journal. Now, it is an opinion article, but this is basically um, at least very close to the opinion of pretty much every leftist in Alberta and also in Canada, at least to varying degrees. And there's a lot of stuff that's just complete bunk, complete garbage, and I wanted to talk a little bit about it. So, getting right into it here, they go on to say the world price of oil hitting rock bottom has understandably generated a flurry of discussion and concern in Alberta. It has had devastating impacts on our economy and our government's revenue, both of which were already problematic due prior to the crisis. On the economic side, workers have already been laid off by the thousands, often while large corporations they work for continue to make massive profits. At the same time, successive Alberta governments have counted on oil and gas revenue to pay for substantial portions of our public services. The current government's recent budget was based on oil projections that looked unrealistic even at the time, and now they look laughable. Now, this is an argument that the left always makes that literally makes your head like feel like it's going to blow up. The first point being is that Quebec literally relies on like 12, 13, I don't even know what the number's up to, $1 billion taken directly from Alberta to balance their economy. And yet there's never any of these leftists talking about, hey, we should figure out a way to, pay for ourselves rather than having to steal over $10 billion a year from Alberta. Where are these leftists saying, well, hey, well, maybe if we didn't give away $20 billion to the rest of Canada every year for no good reason, maybe we'd be able to pay for all this crap that we want. They never make that argument. They're just, like I say, the goal is socialism, and it'd be really nice if they could just be honest about that. The goal is to destroy capitalism, to destroy conservatism, and bring on socialism. Like, just be honest about it already. Like who is this guy? Joel French. Like, just be honest about it. Like, you're not fooling anyone. Like, that argument is stupid. Yeah, you think it looks laughable to have our recent budget based on oil projections? Well, guess what? Before the NDP got in, we had less than $10 billion of debt. Now we have what, 60, 70 billion? Most of that was brought on by the NDP, and or a very large percent of the current debt is because of having to pay interest on the massive amount of debt the NDP brought in. So if the numbers were so unrealistic, then why in the world did the NDP run things so much worse than the conservatives did, at least when it comes to the budget? Like, that's objective. Like, there's no debate in that. I'm not necessarily a hardcore conservative, so the whole bias argument makes no sense. That if the if it was such an unrealistic budget, then why in the world did it work prior to the NDP? I mean, it wouldn't have worked quite as good as recently, but part of that is because it's not a free market. Again, they'll say this is, Alberta not doing so well economically right now is a perfect example of why capitalism doesn't work. But yet they refuse to acknowledge that the companies that are leaving Alberta, they're not going defunct. They're just going to the States, most of them. Because capitalism does work. The problem is that you guys don't like the results of capitalism, because what happens under capitalism is the people who work the hardest make the most money, and the people who sit on their butts all day and complain don't get anything, and rightfully so. You get how much you're worth. Like, the problem with the policies that these people want is they want to pay people pretty much the same no matter how much work you do. And if that's the case, then why would you put the work in the first place? That's why socialism always fails. But um, anyway, our government has little to no control over the global price and demand for oil. However, there are other levers related to both our province's economy and revenue they do control. Thus far, the UCP government has failed in nearly every way to put those levers to working in solving either problem, and has in fact taken us even further away from the most cost-effective solutions. And here we go. They're going to talk about the uncost-effective, cost-effective solutions. Um, Instead of stabilizing diversifying our economy, the government has doubled down on our over reliance on oil and gas industries. Now, have the states have they drawn back, or scaled down their oil and gas operations? No, they haven't. Whose economy was doing better prior to this crisis, the states or Canada's? The states. Like I said, that, and again, that's not debatable too, because people have Trump derangement syndrome. They be, oh, the States was terrible. No, it wasn't. The unemployment rate was like half. Median wages were finally starting to go up. All that kind of stuff. So don't give me that BS. Again, if you want to argue that, you're just being biased, and there's no place for a discussion with you. Um, and I understand most of the people watching this are probably people that agree with me, but again, I'm just trying to make the argument here. And like I say, the other thing that Mark mentioned too is that Quebec literally relies on more, north of $10 billion a year being taken from other provinces against their will to balance their budget. And Alberta can still come close to balancing our budget, even though we have $20 billion a year taken from us against our will. Just maybe, just maybe it's Quebec that needs to diversify their economy, because if your economy is so poor that you literally can't get by without stealing more than $10 billion a year from other provinces, then maybe it's just you that needs to diversify. And like I say, the real reason they want to diversify and go away from oil and gas isn't for the reasons they tell you. Um, there's no reason to sorry, there is a little bit of a reason, but the reason they want to diversify is they want to become more socialistic. If the oil and gas industry is thriving, then that's just more and more evidence that capitalism and the free market works. So what they need to do is they need to ban all that. They need to sabotage it again. They just create crippling regulations. Like I say, the government of Canada creates, crippling regulations that largely affect the oil and gas industry. And then, the oil and gas industry has a downturn. They're like, see, we told you, we can't rely on oil and gas. That's literally like me playing hockey against someone, or me boxing against someone, and me like getting someone to literally hit him before the fight with a baseball bat in both of their hands, and breaking both of their hands or both of their arms. Well, yeah, of course I can beat him because I had a unfair advantage. So that's why the oil and gas industry is struggling. It's not because it's inferior or it's not something we're going to have in the future. Like it or not, crazy leftists, we are reliant on oil and gas in the near future. Even if we wanted to go 100% wind and solar right now, we couldn't. It's not possible, especially in Alberta. So stop with that stupid pipe dream that you have. Um, and instead of fixing the massive structural revenue shortage to pay our valuable public service, again, it's again, just proof, all the more proof that they're biased. How do you know that every one of these public services are valuable? How do you know? What evidence do you have to back that up? And what evidence do you have that if some of these public sector jobs were turned over to the private sector, they wouldn't do a better job? Now, they would do a better job pretty much by definition, because if you work in the public sector, um, if you're a teacher, for example, well, guess what? You get paid no matter how good of a job you do. Like I say, public schools, if they do a bad job, it's because, oh, we didn't have enough money. We need more money. We need to have, one teacher per student, because, 10 kids per class or 20 kids per class or whatever number it is. No matter what the number is, class sizes need to get smaller. And why do they want that? Because the smaller the class sizes, the more teachers you have. The more teachers you have, the more money the unions get, the more money that largely leftist voters get, because public school teachers are overwhelmingly on the left, which is why they want so many more public sector jobs, because if you work for the government, you're more likely to support big government. It's not a complicated topic. So anyway, when it comes to the economy, governments love to actually. So I forgot to read this part. They're making significant cuts across all areas of public services, including all the usual stuff you can read. But this is the one thing to ask too: is that um, for all the leftists out there, is that if we physically do not have the money to provide all the public services that you want, are you okay with not giving out all the public services? And if your answer to that is no, then you're living in a fantasy world, because you're literally saying that if you're a family that makes $50,000 a year, household income, then and that would be like your kids coming to you and saying, you guys are terrible parents because you don't want to spend $10,000 or $20,000 a year, max out your credit cards to take us on nice vacations and take us out for supper and buy fancy stuff. you're terrible parents because you don't want to do that. That's basically the leftist argument, because we don't have the money to give everybody free healthcare, free college, free everything. That's literally what they're saying. Post-secondary education, childcare. I mean, when they say public services, they include that. Okay, oh, sorry, healthcare is right here. They mean free everything. But the problem is we don't have the money. It doesn't matter how much you raise taxes on corporations and the rich. That won't work long term, because guess what? When the rich are no longer rich anymore, all of a sudden that tax revenue is gone. And all of a sudden you have a massive funding gap for your free stuff. So it doesn't work. When it comes to the economy, governments love to take credit for successes and blame others for failures. The reality is that most of the levers controlling a largely capitalistic economy are in the hands of the private sector. Now, again, we are not a capitalistic economy. If we were, there'd be no such thing as the carbon tax. There'd be no such thing as most of these stupid regulations. So stop making that argument. Um, while the government has some influence on some factors affecting the private sector, it is quite limited. No, it isn't. The areas of the economy, again, if we were a free market, again, people wouldn't be a true free market. Again, people wouldn't be forced to pay taxes. People wouldn't be forced to do all the stuff that they're forced to do. So again, we're not a free market. Now, if you want to argue, oh, taxes are completely necessary, fine, but don't argue we're a free market, because in a true free market, you don't force people to do stuff against their will. And if it's truly the right thing to do, then you shouldn't have to force people to do it in the first place. Um, so anyway, the areas of the economy where the government has most control over are public services that it provides either directly or through municipal and school board levels, and those areas were precisely where the UC government has implemented significant cuts, leading to tens of thousands of job losses in our schools, colleges, universities, hospitals, seniors care homes, and other public services, such as fire protection and social supports. Now, the job losses are largely overstated. A lot of the jobs that they're getting rid of are people who retire that work a job that isn't deemed necessary for the economy. Like it or not, leftists, a lot of these public sector jobs are not jobs that are essential to run the economy. Um, while Premier Jason Kenney said little during the last election about the need to diversify our economy, he now has become reluctant to convert to the idea, at least in word. However, he continues to undermine diversification efforts by pouring massive subsidies into the oil industry, money that is a high risk of being wasted due to global market conditions. Now, again, if this is another thing that I really can't stand about the left, and it's such a contradiction, is that if you're worried about diversifying let's take a step back. The reason they want to diversify the economy, at least they claim, is that it's not sustainable long term to be so heavily invested in oil and gas. Okay, if you want to make that argument, then the reason they're making the argument is that it's going to cost us more and more money down the road. Okay, well, if you actually believe that, then you should believe that government shouldn't be running massive deficits, if at all. Because if its deficits are not sustainable. So if you think that the oil and gas industry is unsustainable, then you should be against massive deficits. Again, you're just contradicting yourself out of the you know what. So at the same time as massive cuts or shrinking sectors that should be a bigger part of our economic future. Again, what evidence do you have of that? Universities are largely pointless. Most of the degrees people get are pointless. Like, of course, they're not massive sectors that should be bigger. Like, it doesn't make any sense. The current crisis is showing about how important our public services and how stable and protected public sector jobs are from outside factor. The money being sunk into the oil industry subsidies could easily be invested in things like properly staffing seniors' care homes and educating a child care workforce to serve every Alberta family who needs quality care. Now, again, we want to dump all the kids in daycare because the parents can't afford to take care of the kids themselves, because we have so much crippling regulations and such high taxes that both parents have to work. Not only that, we can turn around and start indoctrinating them right from the time that they start talking, basically, into communism, into socialism. So no, that is increasing child care. No, if the economy is doing good, one of the parents should be able to stay home and look after the kids, because again, these leftists claim, oh yeah, the economy would still be so good under us, but yet it'd be like, but on the other hand, it's like, yeah, if we don't give people free healthcare, free, literally, pretty much everything, then everybody's going to die. But again, if the economy's so good under you, you wouldn't have to do that because they'd have the money to pay for it themselves. So which one is it? That brings up Alberta's revenue shortage. The UCP government still fails to admit how poorly our tax system performs when it comes to raising revenue. Now, again, what they're really saying here is that they never tell you about their actual intentions. Their actual intentions are to raise taxes as much as humanly possible. Like, just be honest. Their last budget documents show that having the tax system of any other province would raise Alberta a minimum of $14.4 billion per year, which would eliminate its structural deficit and give it the fiscal capacity to invest in a massive economic boost through expanding public services. Now, this is another fallacy of the left in that not only would it not give us $14.4 billion more per year, when people get taxed less, they don't just put the money under their mattress from that day until the day they die. They spend that money, they invest that money, so that money is reinvested in the economy either way. The real reason that the left wants to do this is that they don't like people being able to spend money the way they really want to spend it. They want to steal that money from people through raising their taxes and spend it on largely leftist institutions to advance their own power. Like, come on, people, just be honest, Mr. French. And to leave it off here, Alberta has obscene levels of wealth inequality. Again, I've never seen any evidence of that. And what they mean when they talk about wealth inequality is to steal from the rich and give to the poor. Now, if you accuse the rich of being greedy because they don't want to have 90% marginal tax rates, then how do you not accuse the poor of being greedy if you want to steal money from the rich? And it is stealing, because if it wasn't stealing, then they would give that money away voluntarily. So again, we don't have I mean, the leftists believe it, but you can't have a functioning and just society where there's different sets of rules for different people. If it's greedy for the rich to want to keep more of their money, then it must be greedy for the poor to want to take their money. It's the same thing. In fact, it's not the same thing, because the quote unquote rich, which usually when they refer to rich, it's people making more than like $100,000 a year. Again, people think that when they hear the rich, it's all the millionaires and the billionaires. You know, it won't affect me, but your neighbor or your friend who's a doctor, or someone who's you're making $150,000 a year, which is good. You're not You're definitely not rich though. You don't own a summer home. You don't own 3, 4 different houses. Like when people hear rich, like I say, those are the kind of people they're thinking of. They're thinking of the hockey players making millions of dollars. They're thinking of the CEOs of the big corporations. That's who they're thinking of. What they don't realize is that they raise taxes on anybody making more than like $100,000 a year, which is what, probably 20% of the population, roughly. That's a pretty good percent of the population. So taxes are the way we invest together in our economic future and social future. Again, they're lying about that. The pandemic is teaching us how valuable and powerful that can be. Again, there's no evidence of that. There's no better example right now than the healthcare system we're all relying on to keep us safe and healthy. No, we're not all relying on it, because the healthcare system has even less of a demand for it right now than it did before. So again, that's a stupid argument. Um, Government provision of K-12 and post-secondary education has allowed those sectors to quickly adapt to the new context, ensuring our societal needs are met more as effectively as possible. The UCP government must concede that our context has changed significantly. I don't think it really has. And Albertans are expecting more, not less, from our public services. Again, I don't know, we're not. Most people just want to reopen the economy and give the middle finger to the government because they closed their business for no good reason. Again, this is just your stupid socialist opinion. Albertans are about our shortage of revenue and engage in Albertans in a conversation about how our tax system can be changed to fund the services we want and need. Albertans just want the government to F off and to have less regulations. Again, stop projecting your stupid socialist opinion onto the rest of us. So anyway, if you like the video, make sure to hit that like and subscribe. Check out my PayPal and email, got linked in the description. Again, appreciate any donations, but at the very least, just hit that like and subscribe if you haven't already. And last couple things, as always, check out my Twitter if you haven't already, and check out my BitChute if you haven't already. Again, all the links are in the description, so you can find them all there.